Okay, so hi, welcome everybody. I hope you're all connecting and joining us for this interview tonight. Welcome to the Windsor Hamilton Jewish Film Festival. This is very exciting because for the first time we're combining two film festivals that have been around for a while, one in Windsor, one in Hamilton, working together during this period of time. Of course, unfortunately, not in the movie theater. We're doing all of this virtually, but it seems to work, and very happy you could all join us. The festival is going on all week. There's actually 10 films being shown. This is the first, so I hope you can join for others as well. My name is Fred Fuchs. I'm in Hamilton, and I'm the chair of the Westdale Theatre, which is one of the sponsors of the festival, and also a film producer. And tonight we're going to be talking about Fiddler, A Miracle of Miracles, a feature-length documentary that explores all aspects of the incredible Broadway musical and the feature film. It'll be my pleasure to be interviewing tonight Max Lewkowicz. I hope I'm saying it right, Lewkowicz.
You are.
Producer and director of the film. And Max is also happy to answer some of your questions as well. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in any questions you might have for Max, and I'll be happy to relay them, and we'll do this sort of as an ongoing basis as we're talking. So anyhow, welcome, Max.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So first of all, of course, there's a Canadian connection here, and I noticed in your bio you went to McGill. Can you tell us a little bit about your Canadian roots?
Well, I grew up in Montreal, and my parents were Holocaust survivors, and Montreal was the second destination after New York for refugees from the camps, after, I think, Israel, then New York, and then Montreal. So I grew up in a bilingual city, and a beautiful city. I really loved it. But I always felt I wanted to go to New York and be in New York. It's very interesting because Fiddler on the Roof, opened up in New York in 1964. And living in Montreal, you don't get a lot of Broadway, or at least then, you don't get a lot of Broadway. You watch television, you watch hockey, but you don't get a lot of Broadway, and I love Broadway shows. So when I moved to New York, I went to see everything, from Carousel to Oklahoma to Rent. But Fiddler on the Roof is special meaning for me, and I was very curious about the story because it connected in some ways to the Holocaust, and in other ways it didn't. They purposely did not include elements of the Holocaust in it. It was most of the pogroms. So I started to,
Were you always interested in documentary film?
Oh yeah, I've been doing doing documentary films for 30 years.
But not in Canada, because Canada, of course, has a very strong documentary,
Yeah, National Film Board. In fact, I'm very interested. I have a lot of friends who said to me, well, why didn't you get money from Canadian? I'm still a Canadian. I have a Canadian passport. And I said, I don't know. Because yes, it does have the National Film Board of Canada. So
But your film career didn't start till New York, or?
Till New York. Actually, when we say film, it there's features, documentaries, television, all that. I lived in London for 5 years, doing commercials, and that when I was young and wanting a lot of money instead of being poor, and it was a great experience to live in Europe and get connected and all that.
Mhm.
And when I came back to New York, I started to work on a lot of short films for museums,
Mhm.
um, uh, all sorts of different films. So I did a lot of Holocaust-related projects for the Holocaust Museum in New York and Washington and Montreal. In fact, the Montreal Museum, I did a whole group of films for them about the Holocaust.
Mhm.
And then I did a lot of films for HBO and
Sure.
PBS, and now I'm working on a film. We don't know which one of the networks is going to go in, but it's about Helen Keller and disabilities and ableism and how it relates to the way we look at people who are disabled.
That's fantastic. Well, it's kind of a golden era for documentaries, in my opinion. There have been so many great ones done, and also for the theatrical release of documentaries. We showed quite a few documentary films in our theater when we were still open, and did incredibly well. People seem to be more receptive to especially feature-length documentaries than ever before. So, so I am curious, when did this idea first come to you to do a documentary about Fiddler? And did someone approach you? Was this your own idea? Where did it all start?
No, you know what? I'm constantly mixing different ideas all over the place in
Sure.
one big pot, and whatever comes to the surface. Fiddler. I went down to the Museum of Jewish Heritage one day, and I think they were having the introduction to the 2015-16 revival of Fiddler, the fifth revival. And they had all these people on stage, including, just everybody, all the girls that played in it. And I met Sheldon Harnick, who is the surviving creative head of this project. Joe Stein, unfortunately, is gone, and all the others.
Yeah.
And I started to talk to him, and he was such a great storyteller. I always said, you have to have a great storyteller for a documentary. That's the key to it. Besides, of course, a great story, but there are millions of great stories, but you need someone who's really into it. And we started to shoot interviews with him. Mm-hmm. And he was very funny and very pithy and very, he's a wonderful guy. So we started the film, and then we just expanded. And every time I asked somebody to be in the film, and there's a lot of people that aren't in it, but they said, sure, I'd love to be in it and get involved. So.
Well, maybe people don't realize, but often documentaries do happen that way, right? It's not like suddenly, okay, here's a green light, here's all the money, go do it. You build up, you just begin, you start shooting material, and then financing comes along somewhere. So how did that finally happen? When did you find some money and get some people behind this?
Money. Money's the dirty word in documentary filmmaking. I think in every filmmaking. I had done a lot of different films, and I had connections to a lot of sort of wealthy, powerful people that I knew just from the films. They loved the films that I did, and I just asked them. I said, I'm doing a project about Fiddler on the Roof. And they said, what about Fiddler on the Roof? And I said, it's an incredible story. Wait until you hear what I've discovered.
Yeah.
And they said, okay. Rich people will give you money if they feel it's something that's connected to them.
That's right.
So.
And were there rights issues? Was that complicated?
Oh my God, yes. We have so much. If you know the film, there's so much material there.
Yeah.
The music and all the rights were given to me by the family, by Joe Stein and by Joe Stein's family and everybody, the entire group, and they just said do it well. So I put together a short cut of about 10-15 minutes, which I showed them in my apartment, and the ones that are alive, of course, and the family members, and they loved it. They loved how I was addressing it. And I worked with, all the different people who were somehow touched by Fiddler on the Roof, both creatively, family-wise, and it just exploded. It was like a souffle.
Yeah.
And I have to just make sure that the souffle didn't collapse in on itself, using that metaphor.
Well, again, you would think somebody would have done this before, and it had never been done. I mean, it's sort of interesting that
I don't know. Maybe they thought that. How do you do a documentary about? The difficulty about this project was I didn't know which way to go. Okay, so what happens is you have a story of a Broadway show that's an incredible success.
Right.
It was on top of Broadway for 9 years.
I know.
And you have a story about people's ancestors and relatives in Eastern Europe. You have all the elements that relate to today, refugees and racism and all sorts of stuff, which had a connection to it. Women's rights is amazing. And then there's this incredible music, which we
unbelievable.
So how do I tell the story of the music? And so what I did was I went through the show and basically created a series of chapters which presented different elements that related to the individual pieces of music. So for example, matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match. That's women's rights, women in Eastern Europe, Jewish women in Eastern Europe. There was terrible abuse there and all that. And you have Anatevka and Far From the Home I Love and all these remarkable songs, and each one relates in a way to our situation as human beings. And that's what makes it so beautiful and so powerful. And it's amazing. I still cry every time I see it. I mean, everybody tells me they cry still when they see Fiddler, and they're making a new version of it.
Are they?
What's his name? Thomas. He's the director of Hamilton.
Oh, Thomas Crow. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's very talented. That's
very,
great.
very talented. And I'm friends with Alex, who is the musical writer or musical arranger for Hamilton and in the Heights, and of course the brilliant.
The interview with Lynn was fantastic. I mean, it was just.
He's a funny. He's a funny guy. We had a good time talking about it, and he was telling me that In the Heights, his first big success was based on Fiddler.
Yeah,
completely based on Fiddler. So,
and he done Fiddler. Yeah, he was a student of all this, so he really.
Absolutely, he really knows his Broadway musicals.
Well, it is interesting when you talk about storytelling and documentaries, because very often, documentaries have a narration, or there's one person who goes around interviewing people. And I think you did an incredible job, because there really wasn't one single point of view here. There wasn't one narrator per se. And that must have been a very interesting process to get to pull that all together, right?
Well, none of the films that I've done I know this sounds like a crazy thing. None of the films that I've done have narration.
Interesting. Huh.
They have participants, witnesses, experts who, talk about things. If you're telling a story of the past, you obviously don't have the people there to discuss it, but you have people who could say the line. So I don't like just the narrator, though. It makes it very easy. Makes it a lot easier in terms of creating it.
Sometimes. Yeah.
You just the fact that you have somebody who says, okay, can you give me a line about
yeah, no, I know.
I know you're a producer yourself.
But again, here you must have had, I mean, it was an hour and 30 minutes, right? 90-minute movie, feature-length movie. But I can't even imagine how much material you must have had. Was the editorial, I mean, this could have easily been much longer, I'm sure. Was there a specific plan to keep it to 90 minutes? Was that part of your challenge, or?
No, I just went through something that I felt would work. I think maybe some parts of it were a little too long. The Ukrainian scenes maybe went a little too long. But I it's just whatever works, at the time. And some films are 2 hours, some films are 90 minutes, some films are an hour.
Yeah, no, of course, it's whatever feels right. But
yeah,
because again, watching, and it was actually incredible how you could seamlessly sometimes integrate old interviews with the new interviews. And I didn't even know which was which at times. But some of the archival footage, like the Temptations singing "If I Was a Rich Man," that was priceless,
It's very funny that we found that piece, and it went back to a special that was done by Diana Ross in 1968.
Yeah.
We tried to find who owned the rights to that, and we couldn't. We went everywhere. So you mentioned before about rights. MGM, just the footage of the film was a huge and expensive task.
Sure.
And then we had hundreds of photographs and tons and tons of footage and historical images and all that. So yeah, the licensing was quite complicated in it. So.
And then the footage from Japan, of course. Now, did you go and film that yourself, or was that found footage?
We filmed some of it ourselves, but there's nothing like found footage.
Yeah.
It's called begging footage. There's a wonderful organization here in New York called MTI, Musical Theatre International, Drew Cohn, and I asked them, they license or they send out all the rights to Broadway shows that have completed their run. And I spoke to them and I said, what's playing now this year and where? So he said, well, in Britain, you can find it. You can find it in Canada. You can find it in Japan. You can find it in, I can't remember, Holland, in Amsterdam. And in fact, every year, Thailand we went to, the thing about it is it plays everywhere all the time. So it was great. And we went to some of the places, and then places that were too expensive, we asked the production company to shoot for us. The company that was putting on the play, the musical, and they loved it. They loved to, but it was a labor of love for all of them, and me, of course.
Well, again, it's certainly a show. I grew up in New York, and I saw it when I was like 11, with Zero Mostel, and I can remember my grandparents brought me there, who were from a place very similar and they were crying, besides laughing, and I never seen my grandfather cry. This was like a big deal, and I asked him, what was it like? And he said, I was 4 when I left. So he really didn't remember it, but he remembered it, and it has just that unbelievable emotional impact for so many people. And I thought one of the most amusing stories was the Japanese woman.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you mean at the beginning of the film, the beginning of the documentary?
The one who thought, how could you write this? It's about Japan.
Yeah. Oh, that was the producer. Yeah, that was a funny story that they said, how could Americans understand this? And I think Joe Stein said, why? And so he says, because it's so Japanese.
Yeah, that's
so.
I thought one of the other extraordinary things the film did was really show how Fiddler, I would say, was a product, but was certainly part of what was happening in New York in 1964. And I thought you did it great, and obviously found great footage as well, to really help people maybe who, are younger and experienced Fiddler later in their lives, to really try to help them understand how this could have happened in the first place, where and how, and the interview with Hal Prince was just fantastic,
He was great.
Yeah, I mean,
poor Hal. He died a year after we finished filming him, and that was sad. But he was an amazing character, amazing personality.
And most people, at least I think of him as a director. I forgot, he was a producer long before he became a director, and really shepherded some remarkable pieces like this through. For me, the other interesting, and I don't know if it's not known as well, but certainly to explore Jerome Robbins,
Oh yeah,
and,
of course.
and what an extraordinary guy he was, and Jerome Wilson Rabinowitz, right? And and I certainly knew of all his talent, and I think we know of his great success with West Side Story and everything else. But the story about his participation with the Un-American Affairs Committee, and that was kind of extraordinary. I mean, I guess it's well known, but people don't like to talk about that. And I think it was quite interesting for you to include that information, to show the challenges that were going on for so many people.
Yeah, well, it was it was a period of time where people who were gay could not come out of the closet readily, and if they knew that you were, they used it as a Damocles sword over you, and they said, you do what we want. He was an amazing person, but like a lot of people say, like Stephen Sondheim says, he's a nasty person, but I wouldn't work with anybody else. Sometimes you go to bed with the devil to try to create something magical. So
yeah, well, and again, his participation and the innovation that he brought to it was just something that, at least for me, was I never really understood that well. I really, I mean, I knew he was a choreographer and a director, but this was personal to him in many ways. To all the people who were involved. They put their own lives and their own stories into Fiddler. And, and there really is no one author, of a Broadway musical like this. It's also very interesting to hear about how it was a disaster in Detroit in the early tryouts, and we always think it's, when it's a big success, it was obvious all the time, but certainly not this time, was it?
No, they were freaked out, but Robbins was this very powerful sort of, he said, we're going to do what we have to do to make it right. It wasn't success. The big first good reviews they got were in Washington.
Okay.
And then it just opened up, and I'm now very curious how Steven Spielberg is going to do with West Side Story,
Me
the
too.
new film,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw a trailer for it, and
Yeah.
it has that. I don't know if you if you noticed at the beginning of the documentary when we do the aerial, the helicopter that we shot over our building, there's a whistle there at the beginning as it flies over the George Washington Bridge. That's
Little shout out.
that's the homage to West Side Story.
I think it'll be fascinating too, and I don't really think of Spielberg as a musical kind of guy, but and then let's talk about the film a little, because the Norman Jewison story, of course, I knew that story, and Jewison had traded on his last name and didn't really correct people, but I still find it fascinating that that the head of UA didn't even know he wasn't Jewish. They had made like 2 or 3 films together, that done in Heat of the Night, and and he wasn't someone who really had done musicals before. So it was someone.
No, but he was a brilliant. Norman is a brilliant director, and very, very involved with the stuff. He's in his 90s now. It's really
Canadian, of course, for those.
Of course, Toronto, or as you say in Canada, Toronto.
That's right.
you leave out the T, so it's Toronto.
I had to learn that when I moved here right away.
Yeah. As soon as I hear somebody say, "Well, we're going to Toronto," I said, "You're Canadian, aren't you?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" Norman Jewison is a wonderful Hollywood director, and he really connected with this film. I'm shocked that it didn't win more Oscars.
Yeah, well, that's very
won 3.
The Academy is very, especially back then, was very political, and studio, and what else was out there. But I agree with you, he did an extraordinary job, and the most difficult, of course, was the casting. And I had never really heard the story of how he had cast Topol, and I thought it was a great story, and why he made that choice, and obviously it was the correct one. But it's funny. There were so many things I thought I knew about the film and the show but there was so much you exposed us to here that I had never heard, and most people never heard. How fun to hear songs that were not in the show. What was the one? When the Messiah Comes?
When Messiah Comes, yeah. There's a whole bunch of songs. There's a whole bunch of other songs that we cut together, we animated, we had some section. We didn't put it in the film, it was just too long. But there's one about his horse that goes lame all the time, and there's a lot of songs that never made it into the Broadway show.
Now, is there any controversy about the show and the film? There wasn't a lot of controversial or sort of any kind of negative blowback about the subject. Does that just not exist, or did you intentionally not bring that into the film?
That's an interesting question, because I'm trying to think if there was there really wasn't any negative response to Fiddler at the time. They were just worried that it was too Jewish themselves, all the but except for that, I think it became a big hit, and it didn't have. The only part that really sort of stands out, and you have to question yourself, and I think both Shalom Aleichem and Joe Stein addressed it, was intermarriage. The scene where Chava wants to marry Fiedka and leave. There was a very interesting point there. I just want to mention that in the film, not in the, I don't think in the Broadway show, but in the film, Chava and Fiedka are leaving, and the family is tying up all their possessions on the cart. and they come up to the family and to the mother, to Golda and the other girls, and they said, "We're leaving. We're going to another place where people will be more caring and won't let this happen. We're going to Krakow." Now, I don't know how many people in the audience between 64 and now really realized that line. And I never could ask Joe Stein, he was dead, but I asked his wife, did he want to insert that? Because Krakow was, if not the center of the Holocaust, it was certainly one of the hotspots, 40 kilometers from Auschwitz-Birkenau. And when I heard it, because my mother was from Krakow, when I heard it, it shocked me the first time. And when I asked people who I knew, friends around me, did that get you? And they said, no, why? They didn't get the fact that he said, because this young couple who are, let's say 20, 21 or 20, it's 1905, they leave Anatevka and they go to Krakow and they live there. So it's 1905, 35 years later,
30 years on, yeah.
When they're 55.
Yeah, that's when it's
happened. They are doomed.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're doomed. They're going to go to Birkenau, to Auschwitz. But very few people reacted to that, and I have a feeling that Joe Stein played a little trick on the audience, a little thing where he said, "Look, no matter where you try to run, you can't hide." Yeah. So they could.
Yeah. I thought it was fascinating about the Chagall painting. I think I'd heard that story, but maybe not, and how much it influenced not just the title but the design of the show, and then of course those animations. Tell us a little bit about that, and where did that idea come from, and who helped work on with that?
Well, Jerry Robbins loved Chagall's work, and he asked him to be the set designer for Fiddler when it was coming. And Chagall wrote back a short note saying in French, "I'm too busy." He's in France. "I'm too busy. I can't do it." So when they started to do the sets, Boris Aronson, who was the set designer, created this circle. There was all circles in the show and in the film and all that. It's the circle of the village. Everything, everything deals with circle and connecting, and then the breakup of the circle when the village gets there. So he created this remarkable set design that was probably as good as Chagall's, and was beautiful. And I wanted to somehow bring in a part of the greatness of Chagall's paintings, and I found a young woman who's an American who's living in Rotterdam, who's an animation artist, and I said to her, look at these Chagall paintings. Can you animate something on glass for me? And she said, give it a try, and she did. I had heard that she had won a lot of festivals and stuff like that, and she was very interested. Her name is Tess Martin, and she created these beautiful moving animations where she painted in oil and watercolor onto pieces of glass, and then animated the images on the glass and all that. Yeah, it was very.
It was just beyond being beautiful. I don't know what it brought. It brought a different kind of flavor, color to the film. It was I don't know. I wouldn't say it was a relief, but it just sort of kept,
It gave you a chance to breathe. Yeah.
yeah, to just kind of pause and just enjoy the beauty of it. How many minutes of footage is in there? I couldn't even,
Oh God,
how much is there?
me on that. I mean, we uh, we had at least 30 minutes of.
Oh, wow.
No, but
No, I'm not in the film, but you had that she did so
yeah,
much.
yeah, that we still have it. It was animated, but how much was used? Maybe 4 minutes or 3 minutes.
I would say around four, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it was a great, and several people in the Q&A have mentioned that in particular, that was something that they thought was quite extraordinary, you know, and maybe it was because it just wasn't expected, you know, and it was quite different. You know, now towards the end of the film, I know it was interesting how the connections were being made to, I guess, contemporary society, you know, and it's still happening in terms of refugees and et cetera. And of course, you know, that Fiddler is still alive and well. I mean, the footage of this young Black high school, I guess, was kind of incredible that was going on and still being performed in Yiddish, of course. I think that's remarkable. Again, is that something you think about when you begin? You know, at what point do you really, you know, I just don't really, you know, I'm more from the traditional film, you know, people write a script and you work on it and
You're right.
You know, got a beginning, middle, and end to start with. And I'm just always interested in kind of how that all, the more, I wouldn't call it political, but the more societal and, you know, and also what were you doing, you know, in terms of the early 60s? Was that always your intention?
I don't want to make a film that's just about you know, the subject of the film itself,
Right.
because that's too self-serving. So there's so many problems in the world. We have a responsibility as filmmakers to expose these problems in the world. I mean, for God's sakes, if you look at these images in India of this Dante's Inferno of burning bodies and pyres, you know, my God, you know, what the hell, where have we come to? The way I do a film is I like to go from the end to the front.
Oh,
So
okay.
the end is, what am I trying to say by this? That certain stories are prescient when they're made, and then it's remarkable how real they are today. The film I'm working on now about Helen Keller, she was 1905, 1911, deaf and blind and a woman.
Yeah.
How she could create all that and write so many books and all. In fact, people question the truthfulness of it, but she definitely was real. But you have to relate it to now.
Yeah, or why you tell it, yeah.
Shakespeare can be related to today like anything else. You know, we connect that way. So the way I do it usually is I hear from the eyewitnesses, from the people that I interview, and I say, what does it feel like, or what was it like, or can you tell me a story about your life, and etc. And then I collect these statements, which end up becoming a tapestry of voices, and they will all go into separate categories. And then we build on the categories. What is most important? What is less important? And then you construct it, and that works. That doesn't work, then you know it's a standard process. But in fact, what's interesting is I got an email tonight from this woman who's a remarkable woman. She's deaf-blind lawyer. The first one that she was originally from Eritrea, and she became a lawyer at Harvard, deaf-blind, became a lawyer at
Yes.
Harvard, and she's an amazing person. And she wrote me. She's very interested in projects. She says, do I have a copy of the script? And I haven't written back to her that that's not the way I make the documentaries. I don't have a script. I have an outline of what I think the categories are, but not a script. That's more set pieces and all that. So
I was going to ask you how long did post-production take, but the whole thing is post-production. There is no.
Yeah, it's all post. The thing about it, there's a lot of shooting that's involved, and then you have gaps. You have somebody. I wanted to get Chaim Topol in the film because we had a whole section about Tevye, and so we flew him from Israel with his son. I got a donor actually who said, and we brought him over, and he was terrific. So, in fact, he met the Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish, Tevye.
Oh, what a great thing that must have been. Great moment.
Oh, I have these images of the two Tevyes.
And am I crazy? There was that footage with him and Danny Kaye.
Yeah.
Where did you find that?
Well, I have to check. I mean, we have logs of everything.
Crazy.
Yeah, what happened? No, it's in Hebrew.
Oh, it's in Hebrew. Excuse me.
Yeah. What happened was the play opened in '64 in New York, and then it opened in '66, I think, in Israel, and Topol got the part. He I forget the name of the film that he was in, an Israeli film, and he didn't speak English. Yeah. And then they brought him to Jerry Robbins actually brought him to London to play in the Fiddler version in London on stage, and he blossomed in it and all that. Yeah, but he dances with Danny Kaye, who is really a schmaltz person. Danny Kaye, he loved, So.
No, and it's interesting, of course, to think of the Yiddish version because that's what they spoke.
Of course, and different dialects of Yiddish.
Different dialects. So who speaks English?
It was very interesting because the writer who translated the Yiddish version in Israel, he was a Holocaust survivor, but he was a playwright and all that. And there's a lot of changes in the Yiddish version. It's a lot more pious.
Okay.
Instead of they saying tradition, they sing Torah, the word Torah.
Oh, really? Torah, they use the word.
Yeah. And there's a lot of elements to it, but it's a wonderful version, the Yiddish version. And I remember, I speak Yiddish, so.
Okay. Yeah. So do you see much Yiddish theater in New York still, or?
No, not at all. Not at all.
When I was a kid, I can remember my grandparents still went to Yiddish theater.
Oh yeah. It was vibrant in the Lower East Side. Oh my God! You could go to Ratner's. You could have some herring and bagels, and then go to see Yiddish theater, and it was a whole world.
Yeah. No. Sad. Yeah, it's kind of gone. Yeah. So again, the film, was it ever in your mind that it would be out in theaters and movie theaters? And because it feels like, certainly at the Westdale, it would have done quite well if we'd been able to show.
Oh yeah. We got the distributors for it that wanted it were Roadside Attractions and Samuel Goldwyn Films, and they wanted it and all that. So it was supposed to open August 23rd, 2019, around the country. We had about, it was around 200 theaters that it was going to open across the country and then open it up to the world. And then that fall, there were, these stories of COVID, and and theaters saying, well, wait, whoa. I don't know the exact dates. It was like just a blur. But it was supposed to open in a lot of theaters and play in a lot of places, but COVID, sort of shut it down.
Yeah. And so where did it first appear from a television perspective, or?
It's been everywhere, but the big on PBS Great Performances.
Oh, PBS Great Performances. Yeah, that's where it first.
Yeah, I don't know first, but it plays over and over again.
Yeah.
And I don't know what would, there's so many people that want it, and it's really evergreen. It
Of course.
it doesn't have a due date. So I'm trying to remember what they told me, because they want to do it in England and Sky and BBC and all that. But I'm already on.
Yeah, well, that's the thing as a filmmaker. You make them and then you put them out there, and what can you do? You can't control it anyhow. So
no, you can't. You
might as well just get on to the next one.
Yeah. So at least we can use the same talents and disciplines that we have for making previous versions of films. So.
Well, it looks like you have regular collaborators at your company, and
yeah.
Nice.
My cameraman's been with me for 20 years, and my
that's fantastic.
editor has been with me for 15 years or 16 years. So
that's a great thing. And do you just sort of focus on one project at a time, or do you always have lots of little things on balls on? You can't, right? Yeah.
My wife. The favorite expression is, "Are you crazy? You're taking on 2 at a time or 3 at?" And I say, "Well, what if 1 or 2 falls down? And also they're interesting stories." So usually I work on one main production, and I'm sort of looking around for at others and starting to write ideas down in terms of the. How the structure is going to be and what I'm trying to find out from it and all that. So
I'm curious, why do you think we're sort of in this golden age of documentaries? It does appear that there's more being done, or better quality. I don't know how to say it, or more people are interested in watching them. Maybe, is that what it is? Or it really?
Well, they feel it's more real. Fred, I think there's a reality that you look at if you want to know the story of who Jeffrey Epstein was, or if you want to know a story about different personalities and characters and all that in the world. The documentary tries to keep it as true to form as possible. Some are just too much. I mean, I was watching another one the other night called Exterminate All the Brutes, which is really, really hard to watch because it really deals with genocide. It's like a 4-part series on HBO. So it's very, very difficult, but things are changing. People aren't going as much to theaters. They're watching it streaming on television at home, and
I'm curious, who are some of the documentary filmmakers who inspired you, or who still inspire you, or who you feel are really some of the best?
Well, what's his name from the Canadian Film Board? Oh God, I'm getting old. I'm forgetting.
I'm not sure which one you mean.
Back
to the 50s. Anyone in the audience can help us here?
There are a lot of great documentary filmmakers, but usually they don't stand out, and they don't take a lot of exposure.
Well, I'm thinking of Werner Herzog and Ken Burns and those kind of guys.
Well, I'm not. Ken Burns is not my style.
Right, that's interesting. Yeah.
He just keeps going along the path,
Same.
and he can make a lot of films, but it's all narration and the same stuff.
They feel very similar stylistically. Yeah.
All
Same,
of them, and
same form applied to different content. It doesn't make sense. There's no marriage with the content and form.
right. So, but he's hit the rainbow, the golden container at the rainbow, and he gets money from General Motors
and Werner, of course, is one of a kind.
Totally. Yeah, he's very. A lot of people want to do documentaries, but look, if you're Tom Hanks, and you want to do a documentary about anything, about Normandy, and then somebody says, no, I'll give you $12 million to be in this film about space invaders. Well, what are you going to do?
I know.
Unless you're, I'm not saying that none of that is true, but
no, I understand. If you're part of the entertainment industry and you're a filmmaker, and there are other choices, documentaries are hard and
very hard
and not very lucrative usually, and they take a lot of time, and but they're so important, and they give us a record that lives forever, and let's face it, your film is going to exist and and be there now for when people still watch revivals of the Broadway musical, or they still watch the film, or I hadn't heard there's another feature film being made. That's kind of interesting. It's hard to imagine, but
Well, people get sort of a little annoyed. A lot of people said, how could it be better than Norman Jewison version, 71? So we'll have to wait and see and all that. But
it's crazy, isn't it? That's our business. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
This was really great. Someone wanted to, we have some Montreal fans who are shouting out, we love Montreal, and wanted to know why could you study film at McGill, or did you study something else when you were there?
I did my master's at NYU, so McGill was undergrad.
Yeah, it felt. Anyhow, this was great. Thank you for your time. I know you've probably been doing a lot of these, but we really enjoyed the film, and we will show it at the Westdale once we open again, because
I hope
sure we'll find plenty of people who, and even if they have seen it, there's something about being in a movie theater, of course, with an audience that you can't duplicate at home, no matter how big your TV set is. Now, for the people watching, I also want to remind you there'll be another talk. We're going to do this again tomorrow, though at 4:00 in the afternoon, because our director is in Italy. So we're going to accommodate him. It's a film called...
I wish I was there.
I wish I was there too.
Can he take me along? Who is that?
It's a wonderful film. It's called Thou Shalt Not Hate. Have you heard about this film?
No.
No, it's very, very good. An Italian Jewish director named Mauro Mancini, very recently done. It was, it actually showed at the Venice Film Festival. Small indie film, but very, very beautifully done. Beautiful tone, some incredible actors. Vittorio Gassman's son is in it, Alessandro, and I don't know if, did you know that he was Jewish? I don't know if you know.
No, I did not.
Yeah. Very interesting film. So anyhow, well, thank you all for attending. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you folks tomorrow. This was great. Bye-bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much. Bye-bye.